I'll start by saying this isn't one of those stories where my life was at risk. There was no gun pointed at my head. No deranged killer chasing me through the woods. I wasn't in danger. Not in the way you'd expect. But what happened that night is the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my career as a cop, and it never left me. I can still picture the scene just like it happened that day. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. Just a routine traffic stop on a quiet highway. I'd done it 1,000 times before. A car going too fast, sirens on, driver pulls over. You check their papers, maybe a ticket, maybe a warning, and you move on. That night should have been just like that. But it wasn't. What I saw still makes me sick. Not because I was scared for myself, but because of what they had hidden. And the way they looked at me, like I was the punchline of some sick joke only they understood. I pulled them over past midnight, a red sedan swerving and going way over the limit. Inside were 2 women. The driver was skinny with stringy hair pulled back tight. The one in the passenger seat was heavier, stuffed against the door like she barely fit. They both smiled when I approached, wide smiles that didn't fit the situation. I told them why I stopped them. They kept looking at me, nodding, giggling under their breath like teenagers hiding liquor. Except they weren't kids. They were older, late 30s maybe. The smell inside the car wasn't alcohol, so I asked them to step out. They did so without hesitation, still smiling. We ran them through the breathalyzer. Both came up clean. My partner checked their licenses, and everything was valid. Nothing obvious to hold them on. Still, their behavior didn't sit right with me. Their eyes didn't leave me. Every time I looked up from the paperwork, they were watching, lips twitching like they wanted to burst out laughing. The whole time it felt like they were waiting for me to catch on, like I was missing the joke. My partner went to check the inside of the car. He went through the glove box, under the seats, the usual spots. Nothing. He shook his head at me. We couldn't hold them. On paper, they were clean. I was ready to send them off with a warning, but when I walked back to my cruiser, I turned around. They were still standing there on the side of the road, side by side, staring at me. That same twisted grin plastered across both their faces. Not nervous smiles, not polite. It was mocking, daring me to step closer. For a second, I thought about letting it go. My shift was almost over. But something in the way they tilted their heads, synchronized like they'd practiced, made me walk back. My gut told me to. I asked to see in the trunk. They didn't argue. In fact, the heavier one clapped her hands once, like she was excited that I'd asked. She popped the trunk, then stepped back with that awful grin stretched wider than before. My partner stood beside me as we lifted it open. Before I even understood what I was seeing, my body reacted. My knees buckled, and I stumbled back. My partner gagged and doubled over, clutching the side of the car. Inside the trunk, something that looked like a little human body. It was a baby. The smell hit a second later. Rotten and chemical at the same time, like they tried to mask it with cleaning products. The head was tilted at an unnatural angle. One tiny arm was sticking out, fingers curled. I couldn't breathe. I bent forward and vomited onto the asphalt. Behind us, they started laughing. Not the nervous kind. Loud, screeching laughter, overlapping each other. They weren't even looking at the baby. They were looking at us, pointing like this was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. My partner pulled his radio, voice cracking as he called it in. I tried to pull myself together, but every time I looked at the trunk, my stomach clenched again. The women didn't move. They just stood there, still laughing, like the sound of us gagging made them laugh harder. I told them to get on the ground. They didn't resist. They knelt down slowly, still giggling, still staring at me with those glassy eyes. It wasn't just laughter anymore. It was like they were performing for me, enjoying every second of my reaction. When backup arrived, the other officers froze as soon as they saw the trunk. Everyone did the same thing. staggered back, hands to their mouths. And still those women laughed. The cuffs went on easily. They didn't fight, didn't argue, just let themselves be hauled away, their sick smiles never fading. We got them into separate cars, but I could still hear one of them cackling from across the lot as the doors slammed. The baby was pulled from the trunk with gloves and bags. Even the paramedics couldn't hide their faces when they lifted the little body out. None of us could look at each other. I sat on the curb, head in my hands, trying to steady my breath. The image of that small arm sticking out wouldn't leave. Every time I blinked, it was there. They were booked, processed, and locked up. No resistance, no explanations, just silence until one of them would start giggling again like it was all a game. The reports were filled out, photos were taken, evidence logged. All the things we do by procedure, but nothing about it felt like procedure. The paperwork was the easy part. It's everything after that I couldn't handle. I never went back to that stretch of road without remembering. I've seen accidents. I've seen shootings. I've seen men ripped apart in ways I wish I hadn't. But nothing compared to opening that trunk. It wasn't just what was inside. It was the way they looked at me when I saw it, like they wanted me to, like my reaction was the prize they'd been waiting for. People ask why I say this is the worst thing I've lived through when I wasn't in danger myself. I tell them it's because there was no reason behind it. No motive I can understand, no story that explains it. Just two women who thought it was funny to drive around with a dead baby in the back of their car. That night broke something in me. I went home, showered, scrubbed my skin until it burned, and I still felt filthy. And years later, I still see that trunk every time I close my eyes. Not because of the body, but because of the laughter. Hi, I'm Anthony Santora, one of the storytellers here at SSG Animation. It's my pleasure to bring to you true crime, scary stories, paranormal, unusual, weird encounters, all to make you think twice before going to bed and turning off that light. If you enjoy true crime stories and scary encounters, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and share for more content like this.
I had been driving trucks across the Australian highways for years. Long nights, straight roads, and silence broken only by the sound of the engine had become routine. That night was supposed to be no different. Just another delivery, a few more hours of road, and I'd be unloading before dawn. The headlights lit nothing but asphalt and trees rushing past. Here and there I saw roadkill or empty signs, reminders of how far away from the city I was. My mind was steady, focused, but part of me was always prepared for surprises. Kangaroos, drunks, maybe a stranded driver asking for help. Still, the road was too quiet, too empty. With each passing kilometer, I felt the weight of night pressing in, but nothing prepared me for what I was about to see, standing right in the middle of the lane. Up ahead, a man blocked the road. He stood, wobbling, holding a beer can in one hand and a frying pan in the other. His body tilted like he couldn't even stand straight, yet his posture wasn't desperate. It was mocking, like he wanted me to stop. Off to the left, a car sat with its hazard lights flashing, and 3 more men leaned against it, drinking, their faces barely visible, but their movements lazy and careless. I slowed for just a moment, unsure if this was a breakdown or a setup. The man didn't wave for help. He lifted the pan instead, swinging it like a weapon, his grin catching the light from my truck. The other 3 laughed from the side of the road. I pressed the horn and turned the wheel, avoiding him. The truck's side mirror almost clipped his head. For a second I thought it was over, but then I heard the bang of metal on metal, followed by the sound of boots scraping against the door. Someone had climbed onto the truck. The man slammed the frying pan against the side mirror until glass shattered across the asphalt. He yanked the door open with one hand while clinging to the side. His eyes were wide and bloodshot, his teeth grinding together as if he wasn't even fully conscious. He reeked of alcohol and sweat. He lunged inside. The pan cracked against my arm, sending a shock of pain that almost made me lose my grip on the wheel. I shoved back with my shoulder, trying to keep him from crawling in, but he was relentless. His face was inches from mine, mouth foaming as he shouted nonsense I couldn't even understand. The truck swerved. I tried to hold it steady with one hand while pushing him out with the other, but he clung like a parasite. He smashed the pan again against the dashboard, sparks flying as plastic cracked. I couldn't hold control any longer. The trailer tilted, tires screeched, and the truck slammed sideways into the dirt, with a sound so violent it drowned everything else out. Then came silence. When I opened my eyes, the wreck was behind me. I was lying on the dirt shoulder, body aching so badly I could barely move. My ribs felt broken, my head spun, and every breath came with pain. I tried lifting myself, but my arms gave out. 3 men stood over me, the same ones I'd seen by the car. They grabbed me by the jacket and dragged me across the ground, ignoring my weak attempts to resist. Each time I tried kicking or twisting free, one of them struck me. Fists to the ribs, boots to the back. The impact left me gasping, choking on blood that filled my mouth. They laid me flat, pinning me down. One pulled a thick black marker from his pocket and began scrawling across my chest and arms. He pressed hard, drawing jagged lines and crude symbols that smeared with sweat and blood. The others laughed, their slurred voices mixing with the sound of my own panicked breathing. I tried to shout, but a punch to the jaw silenced me. Then they slipped masks over their faces, rough, ugly things that looked handmade, shaped like skulls and beasts. Their voice muffled, they circled me, pulling knives from their belts. Each dagger caught the faint light, blades shaking in their unsteady hands. They weren't just playing, they were about to kill me. The one with the largest dagger pressed it into my chest, raising his arm high. His grip was sloppy, his body swaying, but even drunk, the blade was real, and I could see every jagged edge aimed straight at my heart. The seconds stretched as I stared at the blade above me. My arms trembled as I tried to block it, but I had no strength. My chest tightened, lungs barely working, waiting for the strike. The man muttered something in a slurred voice, some kind of chant, while the others shouted and cheered like animals around a fire. I knew he would slip eventually. His hand wasn't steady, his focus broken by the alcohol. The moment he leaned closer, I forced my arm up, grabbed his wrist, and twisted with all the desperation I had left. The knife tore free from his hand, and I drove my elbow into his gut, sending him stumbling back. The others froze for just a moment, masks tilting as if they couldn't process what had just happened. I held the knife out, shaking, my body screaming from the effort of standing. My hand bled from the struggle, but I didn't let go. They began to circle slowly, moving in with jerky steps, their drunken confidence pushing them forward. I backed up, but they closed in. I wasn't going to win this fight. I barely had enough left to stand. My only chance was to break through. So I hurled the knife straight at them. It didn't hit anyone, but it startled them enough to create a gap. Without warning, I bolted into the darkness of the road. Their shouts erupted behind me, feet pounding the asphalt as they gave chase, but their bodies betrayed them. They stumbled, tripped, and cursed, too slow to catch me as I disappeared into the night. My lungs burned and my legs felt like they were tearing apart, but I kept running. Each sound behind me sent a jolt through my chest, and I didn't dare stop. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from them. The night stretched on endlessly, the road empty in both directions. My clothes were torn, the symbols drawn on my skin sticky with sweat and blood. Every step felt heavier, but I couldn't risk slowing down. Hours later, headlights appeared behind me. For a moment, relief filled me. Maybe someone would help. But then caution cut through the hope. I ducked off the road, crouching low in the grass. The car slowed as it passed, and through the windows I saw them. All 4 men, still wearing their masks, still holding their knives. They drove past, searching, their drunken voices echoing faintly into the night. My entire body stayed frozen until the taillights vanished. I knew I had been seconds from death again. When daylight came, I was still walking. My body was broken, but my legs didn't stop. Another truck finally pulled over and the driver helped me climb in without asking too many questions. He drove me to town where I contacted the police. In the weeks that followed, the men were caught. They weren't strangers to the authorities, members of a cult that blended drinking binges with twisted rituals. That night I had been nothing more than a body for their sacrifice. Their drunkenness had saved me.
Hello guys, my name is Edward. When I tell people that I used to go on road trips with my family, they always ask me about the most memorable experiences I had. I always laugh and tell them that I don't have many stories to tell. I only have one. But that one story was enough to make me never want to take another road trip again. It was a Sunday night. All the families were at home enjoying time with each other. I should have been there with my wife Emily and my daughter Lily, but instead, we were driving through the barren highways on our way back from a family reunion. We had decided to take a detour to avoid traffic, which led us to an almost deserted road. Emily was asleep in the passenger seat, and Lily was in the back, snugly wrapped in a blanket, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. The night was cold, and the eerie silence of the deserted road was only broken by the hum of our car's engine. I was tired, but I was determined to get us home safely. The monotony of the road and the rhythmic swing of the car were beginning to make me drowsy. I turned on the radio, hoping that some music would help keep me awake, but there was only static. I glanced at Emily and then at Lily, both peacefully asleep, and smiled. The road was dark, with only the car's headlights cutting through the inky blackness. There were no other cars around, and the landscape was barren. My eyes were heavy, and I struggled to keep them open. I tried to stay alert, but sleepiness was creeping in. I shook my head, trying to ward off the drowsiness, but it was no use. I blinked, and my eyelids felt like they were weighed down with lead. For a moment, I closed my eyes. Just a moment. When I opened them, the headlights of our car were about to hit a girl standing in the middle of the road. I swerved hard to avoid her, and the car skidded to a stop. My heart pounded in my chest, and I sat there gripping the steering wheel. Emily jolted awake, and Lily let out a small cry from the back seat. "What happened?" I think I almost hit someone. I got out of the car, praying that I hadn't hit the girl. The cold night air hit me, making me shiver. I began to inspect the area, and luckily I didn't see any blood or bodies. With a smile of relief that would not last long, I investigated the rest of the area, and to my astonishment, there was no one. In this part of the route, there was nothing but barrenness. There were several lights, so it was hard to believe that I had lost sight of the girl. There was simply no one. For a moment, I thought I was crazy, that maybe I had slept too little or that I had just had another nightmare. I walked back towards the car, but something caught my attention. From further back, I could see the headlights hitting someone. It was the silhouette of a girl. I ran towards the light, but again, there was no one there. I looked under the car, and there was nothing there either. The whole situation started to scare me, so I decided it was time to leave. When I got back into the car, Emily was looking at me with concern. "Did you see anyone?" "No, there was no one there." She looked as confused as I felt, but didn't say anything. I was ready to start the engine, but I couldn't find the keys. They weren't in my pocket, and they weren't in the car either. I looked down. Maybe they had fallen, but they weren't there. "Where are the keys?" "I don't know." I looked up again, and that's when I saw it. The keys were on the outside of the car, I got out to grab the keys, but to my surprise, there was something inside my car. Two eyes were watching me from the window inside the car, in my seat. Emily and Lily didn't seem to notice anything. Suddenly, the car turned on by itself and accelerated towards me. I tried to dodge it, but my body didn't react. I was paralyzed. All I could do was watch as the headlights got closer and closer to me, and my car was ready to run me over. Wake up! The road! A few seconds later, my eyes opened. I was inside the car, almost off the road. I had fallen asleep. Was it all a nightmare? Emily was sitting next to me, terrified. I had fallen asleep while driving. I accelerated the car and continued on my way, extremely confused and a little scared. The road trip continued, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Emily sensed my tension and tried to keep me engaged in conversation, but it was difficult to concentrate. I kept glancing at Lily, who was now wide awake and looking out the window with a curious expression.
Daddy, did you see the girl too?
My heart skipped a beat. What girl, sweetie?
The girl with the red ribbon. She was standing right there.
It was probably just your imagination, honey. Lily shrugged and went back to looking out the window. I tried to focus on the road, but my mind was racing. How could Lily have seen the girl too? I needed to get us out of here as quickly as possible. As we drove on, the landscape became even more desolate. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, with no signs of civilization in sight. The feeling of isolation was overwhelming. I turned on the radio again, hoping to find a station, but all I got was static. Suddenly, the car's engine started to sputter. I glanced at the fuel gauge, and to my horror, it was nearly empty. We need to find a gas station. How far are we from Destiny? I'm not sure, but we are close. We drove on in tense silence, the car's engine making unsettling noises. Finally, in the distance, I saw the faint glow of lights. We pulled into the gas station, which looked old and run down. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows. I got out of the car and went to the pump, but it was out of order. Frustrated, I walked towards the small convenience store, hoping to find someone who could help. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the store was dimly lit and empty. Shelves were half empty, and a thick layer of dust covered everything. I approached the counter and rang the bell, but no one came. Hello? Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I turned around and saw a man standing in the aisle, his back to me. Hey, what's up? I need some help with my car. I'm out of gas. The man kept rearranging the products, ignoring me. Hey, sorry. Can you hear me? Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me, and when I turned around, I didn't see anything. I turned my head back in the direction of the man, and when I did, my blood ran cold again. There was no one there. I hadn't heard any footsteps or the sound of anyone moving. There was no one in front of me. The girl was in front of me. It was the girl from before. Desperate, I ran away from her, bumping into everything in my path. I frantically made my way back to my car with my family. We need to leave now. What happened?
Dad, it's the girl. I told you. She's there.
I turned around and saw her pointing towards the gas station. I followed her gaze and saw the girl standing by the pumps, staring at us with empty eyes. My blood ran cold. Who is she? What is a little girl doing here? We're leaving. The car started on the first try, and I peeled out of the gas station. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the girl standing in the middle of the road watching us. The rest of the drive was a blur. We finally reached the town and found a motel to stay in for the night. As we settled into the room, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Emily and Lily fell asleep quickly, but I stayed up, my mind racing with thoughts of the girl with the red ribbon. I explained everything that happened to Lily, and although at first I thought it was a joke, she could see my face. The fear was real. Lily continued to insist on the girl. Sometimes she tells us that she sees her in her dreams and plays with her. We forbade her to bring it up again, And as time went on, she simply forgot, and the dreams ended. I will be completely honest with you. I still don't understand what happened that night. I don't understand who that girl was, what she wanted, or how we escaped from her. I just know that I will never again take a detour or night roads that I don't know. Most people start their day like clockwork. Get up, get dressed, and jump into their cars, buses, or bikes, headed somewhere without giving it much thought. Every year, however, about 1.5 million people don't make it home after heading out on the road. A lot of those deaths happen during our late-night drives on the way back from a night out or heading to a club. And while most people would blame things like drunk driving or tired eyes, the real danger isn't always what they think. It's the things lurking out there in the darkness of the open road, hiding just beyond the headlights. My name is Ethan Williams, and on the night of February 13th, 2021, I got into my car, pulled out of the driveway, and started heading to a friend's party at around 9 p.m. The party was something a few of my friends put together every year for those of us who weren't in relationships and were looking to have fun, get drunk, and maybe meet someone the night before Valentine's Day. I, however, had just gotten out of a 4-year relationship, so I wasn't very eager to go partying. But after hours of my friends convincing me, there I was, driving into town and trying to convince myself to loosen up and have fun. I turned on the radio to get myself in the right mood, but the only thing on was a slow 90s song I had never heard before. It didn't matter much to me, though, as I wasn't a big night driver, so my focus was more on the road than the music selection. The house was located in a pretty secluded and quiet area, and about 5 minutes away from it, I noticed the road that led up to the house was so dark and narrow that even with my headlights on, it was almost impossible to see anything that wasn't directly in front of the car. The wind was blowing the huge trees around, and it was obvious the road was barely used, even during the day. But despite the difficulty in seeing, I eventually made my way to the house. After spending a couple of hours with my friends, attempting to have fun, I decided to call it a night, and by 3 a.m. on Valentine's Day, I'd said goodbye to my friends and started the drive back home. My mood was quite different during the return drive, and after a couple of minutes sitting in silence, I noticed it had gotten much darker outside, and I could barely see anything that wasn't in reach of my headlights. Soon enough, about 7 minutes into the drive, I got to an area that seemed even darker than the other places, which I naturally assumed was the road I'd used earlier that night on my way to the house. I slowed down, and after once again carefully driving through the darkness, I made it out onto the city roads, where I thought everything would be perfectly fine until I made it home. The ride home that night was nothing out of the ordinary. All I had on my mind was getting into bed after a hot shower, and all I could see ahead of me was empty road. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I spotted something in the distance, and I immediately got that sinking feeling like when you just know something's off. At first, I could barely make out what it was, so I drove a bit closer. What the fuck? I muttered as the strange scene in front of me finally came into view. A black car seemed to be broken down on the side of the road, and 2 safety cones had been set up beside the car in an attempt to stop cars from passing. In the few seconds I stopped to make out the scene, I heard footsteps coming from the distance as a man slowly revealed himself from the darkness ahead. Although I couldn't see anything but a pair of jeans walking towards my car, I knew everything about that situation was wrong and I needed to get out of there fast. The man continued to approach my car, and I decided the best thing to do would be to drive through the cones and leave. But as soon as I put my foot on the gas, the man quickly got in the way of the car, forcing me to stop. At this point, he was now close enough for me to see his face, and my stomach dropped in horror as I saw the massive scar that ran along his entire face, leaving him with only one working eye. The man wasn't huge in any way and was probably around 150 pounds, standing at 5'6". He walked up to the side of the car and pressed his face against the window while knocking slowly with a sinister smile on his face. He didn't have on a mask or gloves, so his intention seemed pretty clear to me, and at the moment I was completely frozen with fear. All I could do was pray someone else came along. The horrific man continued to knock and breathe on my window. After taking a moment to calm down, I realized that since he was now standing by the side of the car, there was no one else blocking the road, and that might have been my only chance to escape. I took a deep breath and turned to the man before saying, "What do you want, man? I don't have any money, so please just leave." The man backed up from the window a little bit, and I could see excitement in his eyes as he replied, "What do I want? Well, I just want a ride, that's all." Most of his teeth were missing, and I remember shaking with fear as I maintained eye contact with him. I knew I had to find a way to change gears without him noticing, so I began to slowly reach for the gear while asking him some more questions to distract him. "Please, man, I just want to get home to my wife and kids. Why are you doing this?" I said in an attempt to make him feel sorry for me. Instead, all I got was a glimmer in his eyes as he noticed my hand grab the gear to change it. He immediately let out a screech and slammed a machete through my window. Startled, I ignored the glass shards and slammed on the gas, taking off through the cones and down the street. I didn't have any time to relax. However, I turned to my right to the insane image of the man latched onto my car door. He let out a menacing laugh before grabbing onto my arm, causing the car to swerve violently. The struggle continued for a while, but eventually, after latching onto my arm one final time, the man began to pull himself in through the window while grunting heavily. Before I could react, I felt his teeth sink deep into my neck. As I shrugged him off, he let out a laugh, and there seemed to be a joy he got from seeing his mouth covered with my blood. Terrified of what he'd do next, I punched him a few times, and immediately I noticed an effect on him. I slammed the brakes, flinging him off my door and onto the road ahead of me. My hands were shaking, and I was losing a lot of blood. Every part of me wanted to run him over, but as I watched him struggling on the floor, I couldn't bring myself to move. About a minute later, he got up slowly before eventually limping off into the darkness by the side of the road. I arrived at the hospital 20 minutes after the incident that night. The doctors had a lot of questions for me, and the police was contacted shortly after I arrived. Once I received treatment, I gave my statement to the police, and although they were informed about the scheme robbers used to get victims to stop late at night, they seemed very concerned by the man I described and the extent to which he was willing to go. A search party was put out for him that night, but despite all of their effort, he wasn't found that night or the next morning. That being said, his description was all over the news for the following weeks. Although he was never found, it became common knowledge to everyone in Boulder, Colorado, to never stop for stranded drivers when taking a late-night drive in the city. This story is loosely based on the highway robbery scheme that occurred in 2016 in Memphis, Tennessee. This happened during a period that saw a string of numerous staged accident scams, leading to countless robbers and murders of people who'd stopped to help fake stranded motorists and end up getting robbed, raped, and in some cases, killed by the very people they were trying to help.